This is Lead Time.
So we get to hang out today with Aaron Engelman. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He serves as a systems technician at King of Kings in Omaha, Nebraska. King of Kings Lutheran's been around for quite a while. Greg Griffiths has been a guest of ours in the past. Mark Zender, longtime pastor there, really kind of a spiritual father for me in many respects. So a lot of respect for what the Lord has done over really multiple decades there at King of Kings. In previous years, he was a production director at King of Kings. He grew up in Kansas, lifelong LCMS follower of Jesus. He's had some other professions that we'll talk about. He's married to an awesome lady by the name of Hannah. We heard about her. She's a Lutheran school teacher at Concordia schools there in Omaha, and she's an instrumental major and teaches worship arts there. And they have three young boys. So the Engelman home is filled with a lot of energy. Aaron, how you doing, man? Thanks for hanging with us.
I'm doing fantastic, Tim, Jack. It's an honor to be on the show. Thank you.
No, the joy is ours. So tell us your journey of kind of finding full-time vocation in the church beyond being a pastor. And when you reached out to us, we got connected. You kind of, for many years, didn't think there was much beyond maybe a pastor and a secretary. So tell that story.
Yeah, I enjoy telling stories. So buckle up. There's lots of points
here.
Let's go. So I, as you said, Tim, I grew up in the Lutheran church. Out of the hymnal, divine service, I can sing every bass line that exists there, and every member of my family for a number of generations has been in that same boat. And so I had the privilege of growing up in a home that was centered around church. It was centered in the Lutheran church as far as the eye can see. Devotions at home. Grandparents that read the portals of prayer, and we practiced reading using the Bible. It's just a happy childhood that I will treasure forever, and that's as much a part of my story as the modern church as well. So I want to make that really clear. My family is the type that just they show up and do stuff. Like I called home a few months ago and chatting with my mom. I was like, "Hey, where's Dad?" And she said, "Well, he's in at the church mopping the gym floor because preschool has a concert tomorrow."
Wow.
I'm like, "Mom, that's like, if that's not our story, right? Like, that's just, if you need something done, we do it, and that's not for our glory. It's for the glory of God, and that's just been an understood part of serving in the church. It's not about you. It's just you show up and do stuff because Jesus is worth it. And so as I grew up in the church, 17 years old, I went on a mission trip to West Africa with our associate pastor at the time, Dan Ramsey, who's in the Nebraska district now in I forget, somewhere out west. He was a missionary in West Africa for a lot of years and went back on a teaching trip to a pastoral school in Dapong, Togo. And I went with him just for fun, for the experience. What I didn't know at the time, Tim, is drawing it to context of what I've learned from consuming your podcast, is Dan was my mentor. I was his Timothy, first in a series of mentors that got me into the church. But what I learned from that trip is I did not want to be a pastor, and that's not to disparage me or pastors. I learned from spending a great deal of time with pastors and missionaries that I wasn't suited for that. I didn't feel the calling in that time of your life where like that's where you feel it the most. And so that was kind of a period on the end of that sense. Like I just didn't want to be a pastor. But I knew Jesus was awesome, and Luther's my homeboy, as the old Lutheran swag says. So what do I do then? As you said, to work in a church, you're a pastor, or maybe a part-time secretary, or accountant, or whatever, part-time, whatever. professionals just didn't work in the church outside of those parameters, and in my mind, for many years to come. So next step in that story then is the LCMS Youth Gathering. So I went as a participant in 2004. Fantastic experience. It was my first plane ride. It was I served in the gathering choir. It was a mountaintop experience. So cool. Fantastic, as it is for thousands and thousands through the ages. Fantastic. Yeah. And fast forward to 2012-ish. I already have an undergraduate degree in broadcast journalism. Basically, I'm in grad school, and I'm looking at videos of the upcoming gathering, 2013, which would have been in San Antonio. And I just started writing some emails. I'm like, hey, how do I get involved in this? And ended up talking to, first off was Phil Grimpo at Inspire Media in Lincoln. If you're not familiar with Phil, you should. He's a
I know Phil.
He's a genius and a stand-up guy, and just does a lot for the LCMS, and I appreciate him so much. Turns out I would go to work for Phil for a while cool. later on in life. But he sends me to a good friend of his, Norm Schaefer, that puts me on the media team for the gathering. I'm like, what is this? Norm's like, hey, you seem like a good dude. Come make videos with us. So I did. So media team at the youth gathering, if you're not familiar, it's a very behind the scenes type of team. If you've been to a gathering or can imagine this, there's just dozens of teams of planners that make an event like that happen, right? If you have trouble, you call the little 800 number on your wristband and you talk to someone, right? Someone has been planning to talk to you on the phone that way for months. And there are teams of people from all around the country that do that, and they do it well because they're well prepared. And the media team does that with, you guessed it, media. So social media. We used to produce a DVD that you all got afterwards. It's spearheaded and led by the full-time staff there in St. Louis. So Meredith now and Mark, of course.
Yep. Mark Kiesling,
the coolest dude ever.
Yep.
And the media team at the gathering, boots on the ground gatherings, there's stuff going on out in the interim years between the gatherings, right? But we all come together and do what we do best to the glory of God and to the support of that event. So for me, it's video. For others, it's photography. It's social media. It's Instagram, the TikToks, there's a body in that room for all of the different avenues there. And what I discovered there is wandered into this activity that was fantastic and a joy to serve that way. But also I learned then, Tim, Jack, that there are other people like me in the world. Lifelong Lutheran or not, they're there. They love Jesus. Luther's their homeboy. And they're like, we have skills that we want to apply to the church. And we found an avenue for that. And so what that did for me in 2013 was kind of reshaped. It gave me a community. There were people in the world with skills, professionals like me, that would be like, "Hey, we want to serve our church in whatever way possible." And it was life changing in a variety of ways, both just to support the event, continue to support the event for the next, what are we on, round 4 or 5 now, but just to have that perspective at that point in my life was crucial. So youth gathering will come up a bit later, but the next step on our journey is a job that I did not get. And normally that's not a major part of your story, right? But for me, it was 2014. I applied and did not get a job at St. John Elsville, which is now Pathfinder. But what did happen is I went through the whole interview process, went to St. Louis and hung out with them for a weekend. Pastor Dion and Steve Hour was still senior at that point, and meeting that staff, seeing that worship, being a part of that interview process was not to be dramatic, but it was life changing to see behind the scenes of a church. And again, I'm divine service, hymn led, everything up to that point, and it was wildly different. It just changed my perspective dramatically. And I was not right for the job. I told Dion in our last chat before I left campus, I'm like, if I'm not right, don't hire me. Right? This needs to make sense for everybody. But even if, like, this was life changing for me, and I appreciate you for it. So then fast forward to 2016, through a connection, Norm, who I mentioned earlier, from the youth gathering, I moved to Omaha to work with Norm for the University of Nebraska. So then we got into a church here, Divine Shepherd, just across the way over there. Started learning worship music. Didn't know that existed for a long time. Modern praise, in my mind, since Smitty and Amy Grant, like nothing had happened in the church music world, besides DC Talk, which we're not going to do that in church, right?
Jesus freak, man.
Oh, classic. Man. Rapping that on the playground in grade school, man.
That's all right.
but we spent time at a new church with a different perspective on worship, and it was there that I spent time with mentor number 3 for keeping track, Dan Ramsey, Norm Shaper, and now Deb Went, who's a good friend of mine. I've worked with her at 2 different churches now. Well, kind of 3. I don't know how you do the math, but we spent a lot of time. I became a tech volunteer, and she was coordinating all of that. We spent so much time together talking about church media, worship, what it's like working at a church, all of those things. Like, she was on staff there, and she mentored me. Like, she's like a sister to me in a lot of ways. And kind of from that, so I kind of wrapped it all my thoughts of, I called it a manifesto. It wasn't that dramatic. It was like a 4 or 5 page document. It was like, hey, I have basically a master's degree in mass communication, and this is what I see as far as communication goes in this church. Let me lead a team of volunteers to support some of these things. Like, I can help out on the website. I can maybe not so many fonts and all the things that you print, like all of those things written up in a document. I gave it to the lead pastor and was like, hey, here's some of my thoughts, let me help. And nothing for a while, but then a few months later, he was like, hey, why don't you just come work here? Right? I'm like, well, that's neat. I can work for a church. Yeah, sign me. I don't care what I'm doing. Like, sign me up. So I did some communication. My role was communications coordinator officially, but ended up just like supporting everything that plugged into a wall. And so worship technology, we expanded the preschool into a childcare, and did support of church management system and their payment systems, and like anything that needed to be done in tech world, I did it, and I loved it. I was on staff there for a couple of years, and then went to work for Phil, who I mentioned earlier, at Inspire Media. Went to Lincoln and did events with Phil for until COVID took all the events away, and I started looking for other work, and then landed here at King of Kings. So COVID took me away from a job that I loved, working with Phil and Lori in the group there. But all these things, all these doors, every one of these little steps just led to the next thing. And for me in this context was directing production at this church here.
Hey. So yeah, go ahead.
It was I didn't know that this profession existed, and through a series of God things, like, here I am.
Yeah, man. Well, I love your story for a variety of reasons. One, the church, especially in this day and age, has to re-understand the roles to which it pays experts to run. We can't we can't rely, Jack, and I'm glad you're on right now. We can't rely on, and we're having some tech problems, by the way, but we'll persevere. We can't rely on a whole bunch of serve team members to run the church website or to run the app. Like, there's a lot that goes on behind. Or if you're in a medium to large size church, to run the finances. Like, the finances in our organization are very, very complex. So there are all of these other roles that are church work roles. I think, Jack, one of the joys is seeing people, one, like an Aaron, say, hey, I can work in the church, and it's going to be different. There's a lot of similarities, but it's going to be different. I'm a minister of the gospel here in this place for the advancement of the kingdom of God. I think when that shift comes, and and this is what I love about your story too, Jack, is that I'm a theologian. I know you're a theologian too, Aaron, but you're a theologian, right? I mean, we want to talk about and help shape how the gospel gets communicated and what is actually shared. So we, like 20 years ago, a lot of these roles didn't exist. It's an appropriate spirit-led evolution to understand the times and do whatever it takes to get the gospel into the heart and ears of people. Jack, any follow-up on that?
Yeah, I often get a lot of opportunity to talk to churches about the importance of operational roles in the church. And what I like to do is I like to encourage pastors and other church leaders to rethink what it means to be a deacon. If you go back to the original story, Acts chapter 6, right? The apostles are struggling with managing their benevolence program, right? The distribution of resources to widows and orphans. And people are concerned that things are unfair. And the apostles are struggling on this, saying this is going to be a huge time constraint on us, and we're supposed to be preaching the gospel. We need help. And so what's interesting is I kind of show two different versions of this text saying, hey, we shouldn't be neglecting the ministry of the word in order to wait at tables. But other translations say we shouldn't be neglecting this in order to manage finances. Right. And so what's going on there? Is this a hospitality issue or is this a resource management issue? And the answer is it's both. It's table work, right? Sure. Table work is hospitality. Table work is working on a ledger and making sure everything is transparent. And so they sought out people full of spirit and wisdom. And spirit is our faith, but wisdom is, how does this computer work? How does this network switch work, right? Like, how do I run this spreadsheet, and how do I run this accounting software, and how do I run this church management system? So we need to think of these people that are serving in these vocational roles as deacons of the church. That's the way I like to encourage people to think of them. Yeah. And it gives I kind of think a fresh insight on the importance of that and the intentionality behind that.
Yeah, amen. There's some controversy right now, and there have been for probably decades. I don't know how long National Youth Gathering goes back, but one of the reasons NYG was so kind of powerful at a certain period of time is because the technology, the worship expression, while still very liturgical, very Lutheran, it was different for a lot of kids, and they kind of saw. And I mean, I'm a product of going to, well, I'll mention a couple things here. Promise Keepers. Now, again, we're not fully into all the theology that went through Promise Keepers, but there was this mass event feel there. Like all of these people praising Jesus. It was like heaven, every tribe and tongue gathered around the throne praising Jesus. That was formative, very formative for me when I was 13. And then another formative experience was going to Atlanta when I was 17 for the National Youth Gathering. And I actually got to be on an arts team, one of those small little teams that do creative dramas and stuff like that. Our district was chosen to be a part of putting that together. That was a major part of my maturation as well. But on the tech front, NYG was always like way out in front. And I think there's a component of the church, are maybe smaller churches and more, and I don't use this pejoratively at all, but more conservative churches, Midwest churches that just look at that form, how they're engaging with technology or story or drama, the arts in general, and kind of scratch their head and say, is this allowed? Can we do this? But in Christian freedom, the LCMS over the years have said, well, yeah, absolutely. Do things need to be done well and in good order? But yeah, there's right now.
How about the printing press, Tim?
How about the printing press? Exactly. But we're struggling right now. I know a number of folks have said NYG is struggling to get the right folks to be approved to be, and I don't know the right folks is the right, but the wide breadth of leaders within the LCMS to be approved just to make NYG happen. So the church is kind of seeing NYG as a, I don't know, a dividing point. And I think that's very unfortunate. And here's why. It hurts the next generation's understanding of what it means to be a Lutheran in 2024 and beyond, because they're watching. They're definitely watching, and can the older adults kind of figure it out together? And I pray we can. Aaron, any kind of follow-up on NYG, kind of the controversies, and really how NYG led on the tech front? Any follow-up?
It is a beautiful expression of the church, Tim. I agree with everything you just said. It pushes boundaries of technology, of production. It's beyond what a lot of young people see, or they see. The only other place they see it as a big concert or big ball game or whatever. Why can't we elevate the church to that level? You know, if we put so much into sports and concerts and all of this, like why can't Jesus be that big too? Like that's exciting to see that on such a scale, and to see 20,000+ of your friends doing the same thing at the same time. Like it's a big deal. It formed my life. You just mentioned it formed yours. Like how multiply that by thousands upon thousands over generations, and
Amen.
It's a beautiful thing.
Amen. Well, let's talk technology. How is King of Kings seeking to be kind of innovative using technology to reach people with the gospel right now?
Yeah. I'm a facilitator at heart. Tim, I take ideas of others and I put them into practice. That has been my role for basically my entire life. I need someone there beside me to say, hey, try this. What about this? What about this? And I'll be like, yeah, let's do that. Also, let's not do that. That costs too much. All of those kinds of things. Right now in this season, multi-site church is on the forefront at King of Kings.
Yep.
So what does that mean? It means we are going to people in their neighborhoods, planting campuses, not individual churches, but campuses, and people will worship there. That is their church. There's live local music. There are people shepherding there in that location. We are delivering a video message. So the teaching part of worship is delivered from our broadcast campus. This is not a new practice, Tim. Like everything at Apple and Cupertino, like they're not the first to do all these things. They're just trying to do their best to make that product the best. So they're like, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to make it the best. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to adapt a multi-site model, this kind of technology to fit what we're trying to do here. On the tech side of things, it's delivering a message. So on our end, on the broadcast campus, lighting, video, audio systems have to be more precise than they maybe were in the past to deliver that well. Because if you're on the other end watching somebody talk to you on a screen, if that doesn't look good or it doesn't sound good, most of all, you're going to check out immediately. Like there's not a human in front of you physically present. So to do that subpar means that you're taking a critical part of worship and their Sunday experience and just making it okay. So from the very beginning of this, the technology played a huge role in that. Like you can do it well, or you can maybe not. So for us, we use a service called Resi. Used to be Living as One. It's a church focus. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but the technology is different. Like it's not just a live stream from here to there where maybe it'll buffer, maybe it'll do this. There's an encoder and a decoder that uses a proprietary technology to send video up to the cloud, where it repacketizes it, sends it down on the other end. If I lost you there, that's fine. But what it means is we have a well-lit, well-framed, audible human on this end sending the word to the other end, and we can guarantee that every frame of video is going to be there and it's going to sound good. So from the technological side of things, that's how we are supporting the gospel message here in our multi-site endeavors.
I love it. Hey, because churches are making a variety of choices right now. We have live preaching here. How is it being received in terms of a well-produced video message from Greg, maybe Zach, Zender, et cetera?
Yep.
How is that being received by these other campuses?
We had a lot of reservations, even from our we're into this sort of team. What is it going to be like watching someone on a screen instead of in real life? And how Greg puts it, I completely agree. Like, if you're sitting in our room here, are you looking at me in real life, or are you looking at the screen that's on the wall, the iMac screen on the wall? We're more used to that than we think. Tim, Jack, we do it all the time. Like, it's not unusual for us. It's just a different context and a different way of thinking about what we're doing on Sunday mornings. So I understand the reservations, but the people that have been doing this for a year, we launched our second campus, if you will, last October. They love it. They know that they will get quality teaching, and that will be there. That's solid, and they can then connect with their community, the actual people in the room. Like, that's a priority too. Like, but we can share resources. You mentioned this earlier, Jack. If every one of your campuses has a pastor and they're preparing a message, even if you're like sharing ideas, right, and the core is the same, how many hours is that person putting into preparing that message? If you consolidate that resource and say, Zach and Greg are fantastic teachers, let's use their gifts to teach, what does that free up on the other end? Does that make sense? Like,
oh yeah,
how many man hours are we saving? If you want to look at it very, very pragmatically, how many man hours are we saving by more people not preparing messages? Kind of wandered into that one, but you know what I mean?
No, I mean, we're definitely considering it right now as a part of our future strategy. And, you know, as much as I want to believe that everyone, and there's such a balance here. I'm so sensitive to this topic because we speak to consumers, we preach to consumers. If it's not like this, there's a part of me that wants to say, well, shouldn't the word just be enough, you know? And it's absolutely enough. But to your point, Aaron, some preachers have been more gifted with communication skills, connecting skills. And if a campus pastor, here's a justification for what you're doing. If a campus pastor, in partnership with kind of the overarching ministry, if a campus pastor, even on Sunday, doesn't have to think about the message, what are they thinking about? The people that are coming through the doors, trying to engage them spiritually and maybe meet with them in smaller groups, trying to pour into more leaders. I mean, the spiritual development, leadership development can even take place a little bit more readily if that campus pastor doesn't have to worry at least every Sunday about a respective message. So yeah, I think there's ample room for conversation here. I used to be much more bullish on this, and I've become, and maybe COVID did something to me with this, because we're just so, where is church? Well, the church has radically been deployed. You know, what does it mean to pastor? I view this as a part of my pastoral responsibility, having Jesus-centered, godly conversations, disagreeing agreeably, growing up into Christ, right? Pastoring today is different than it was 100 years ago because of, technology. And so we've got a number of different people that are helping make that happen. And I think it's something the church should explore slowly. Tech goes fast, but we should explore it with sensitivity. Thoughtfulness, but maybe there's some convergence here into the future between churches, especially like a King of Kings and Christ Greenfield. Anything to add to that, Jack?
Well, I think one of the things that might get, certainly within Lutheran circles, kind of like question marks might be popping up is, well, how does communion work if the pastor is in some other location and,
he's not the only pastor. Well, he's not the only pastor.
Exactly. So I'm just kind of curious how that works.
Yeah, so Jack just popped off. How's it work? How's it work with communion at those places? I mean, I assume you can have a called and ordained servant of the word who isn't the primary proclaiming preacher every single week. Is that right, Aaron?
Yeah, that's right. And we're exploring that at our third campus, which will go live in January at a town close to us, Fremont. Faithful congregation there, 70 years, Good Shepherd, was kind of the typical LCMS story at this point, worshiping less than 100, discussing financial viability in the future, and came to King of Kings and said, hey, can we be a campus? And that's an oversimplification of a very long and thoughtful process, Tim, but that's a good summary. And we're like, sure, let's do that. Part of that process we'll be hiring a pastor to serve there, but they will not be teaching every Sunday of the year, maybe once a quarter. And that's okay. We just got to find the right person that's okay with that, because you guys are, bred to teach, like that's what you've been working for I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tim, but like that's what you've been studying for a long time. Right. Mm-hmm. And to step aside and say that teaching can come from someone else, not because I can't do it, but because what can I do instead? That's what you said earlier, Jack. What can I do instead? I can be with my people more. I can concentrate on this, and this outside of teaching. So
it doesn't mean you can't lead there's a difference between proclamation and teaching. Like you can have multiple Bible studies during that week that the pastor ends up offering. So it doesn't mean that they're not teaching. It's just they're not doing the primary preaching on a Sunday. Isn't that right? For sure.
Yes, of course. And I don't want to. Greg Griffith says this so eloquently. Discipleship happens in circles rather than rows.
Rows, that's right.
I don't know if I quoted that exactly right, but the concept is there. Mm-hmm. Like, why not focus that person on the circles, not the rows, right? How can they equip people to talk to each other? The small groups, the Bible studies, do that instead of everything happens on Sunday morning.
Hey, this has been fun. It's funny, on a technology podcast, we've had technology issues, but we've persevered. All right, just two closing questions. If you just give me, you were very transparent about walking through a more difficult season of burnout in ministry. How did you make it through?
Yeah, so I'll try and summarize this. Because look, I think it's important to tell stories. Revelation said that testimony is important. Mm-hmm. But I can get caught up in, hey, look what I did. Look at all the things that I could accomplish. Because so set the stage. King of Kings, we started talking about multi-site, and all of the goals were there that we've been talking about. The technology has to be in place to do that. And so I said, hey, Aaron, I'm a video professional. I've been an integrator of sorts. I can install all this technology. Like, this will be hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of upgrades here, and I am capable of doing it. Can we just handle all of this in-house? Basically, was my pitch. Or do we hire it out? And the pragmatic side of it that Jack will appreciate is, like, if we hire an integrator, we will pay them, a premium to do that job, and that's fair. That's business. But in this context, I'm like, we could save a couple $100,000 if I design it and put it in. It was an option, and so I went after it. That as mentor number 2, Norm said, this is a project of a lifetime. Like, all the things leading up to spending time with the broadcast engineers at K-State, like being in studios, being a part of broadcast workflows, like, this has prepared me to do this job, right? And I loved every minute of it. But I spent a whole lot of time doing this project, designing it, months on end, I would fall asleep at my laptop at home, planning this and that and the other. And then we got the boots on the ground of like, we're going to move this projector over here, and we're going to put cameras here. We're going to move the tech booth over here. And then there's new carpet, and then there's new this, and we're hanging all these lights in the ceiling. And I had a bunch of very dedicated volunteers. I had a 19-year-old kid at the time that was just getting after it. He was punching above his weight in a bunch of different ways. And for months on end, about a year, I was doing this. So to put that a little bit of perspective on Zach, my young helper, on his spring break, he logged 45 hours of overtime.
Whoa.
Like that's all the time. Like we were just at the church, and I was there when he got there, and I was there when he left every day. And that was, and for months on end. There was one point where I told Hannah, like, don't expect me any night of the week until summer, like 3 or 4 months from now. Like when all this is over, then I will spend time with my family. And this is not a hooray Aaron story. Honestly, like I'm not sure it was worth it. I'm glad we did it. We got it done and on time. The systems were there. They were usable. We launched in October, and that part of it worked out. And I'm very proud of it. I loved every minute of it. Right? Project of a lifetime. But my little dudes that poked their head the door just now, because I don't know, one of them punched the other or something. Like I wasn't there for them. That was before baby number 3. But I if you want to put it in this term, I forgot my first calling and got very excited about something else, and that's not healthy overall. And so I hung it up, just to kind of wrap up that story, because I was like, what can be the message out of this? I left. I left King of Kings, the best job I've ever had, in the 85% of the way through, the best project I've ever done. I was like, I gotta go hang out with my kids, and I was like, bye friends. Somebody, part of that was I was trying to hire another full-time person for about 8 months, couldn't find the right person, and then God brought us a person at just the right moment. I was like, hey, sorry, I want to work with you, but can you just take over? Because I'm out. Bye. And I had the flexibility to do that because I'm not a pastor. I didn't study for 8 years to do this one thing and do this forever. I had options. I went and installed TVs in residential homes, like, and that was 40 hours a week, and I just hung out with my kids more. But I missed it. I consider this a calling. Like I want to work in the church. I for years wanted to work in a church. And so this spring, an opportunity came back up, and I was like, yeah, I took a nap. I took a break. Sign me back up, because this is the work I want to be doing. But now I just do it much more intentional. So Patrick, the guy I work for that has my old job, if you want to look at it that way, he's got 4 kids. I have 3 kids. Like that's our calling. We understand that. Yeah. That's what we're after first. And then we can have excellence. We can do our work very well for the glory of God and technology in this place. So,
hey man, I'm so grateful you're back. I think every leader walks through that point of getting to their limit. If you're passionate about something, you're going to eventually get to that limit. And your wife is often, because you didn't talk about Hannah, I'm sure she said some things. I remember every pastor that is driven to love people gets to that point, hopefully, where your wife says, hey, how many nights are you out this week? How's this working? My wife just recently told me, it seems like you worked harder when you were in Colorado. And I was like, really? She's like, you're home a little bit more now. And I was like, but my responsibility is exponentially more. And I guess you get to that point, hopefully, where you build team, trust, time, and we're locking arms together so that I can release more things rather than control more things, and I can develop better boundaries, and I can look at the past Tim and say, yeah, that wasn't going to work forever. But I still have that same passion. I don't want to ever lose that drive. I never want to give into laziness, etc. I just learned to work in team, and I learned to set better boundaries. That's the leader's journey over time. And I'm glad you've gone on that journey and that you're still working in the church. This has been a lot of fun. And there goes Jack. Jack just popped off. Off goes Jack. So one last question. We're at time, but what is your prayer for the LCMS? Just going back to kind of our earlier conversations around NYG, what are your prayers for our church body, Aaron?
Man, I pray that it continues. The LCMS has brought me peace over years. I don't know how else to describe it. The theology, the apologetics of it, it appeals to my engineering brain. There's so much about the church body that I love so much, but can we think outside the box a little bit? And not all at once, friends. We don't need to jump on every fad and run with it. That's not what we're after. But can we be intentional about everything that we're doing? Let's consider everything that we do every week and be intentional about it. Does it line up with Scripture? Does it line up with theology? Is it intentional for the furtherment of the kingdom? That's what I'm after.
Amen. Yeah. Well, that's what we're after here as well. Jack, you made it back. This has been I've never had you pop off and on. I can't hear you. If you're watching, are you okay? There you are. Closing thought on this conversation with Aaron. Jack.
No, I'm just so thankful to hear the perspective of, the vast majority of the time we got people on there in pastoral roles. And I think it's excellent for us to highlight more people serving in other roles, what I'd call other types of deaconing roles, other roles that actually have a tremendous amount of impact on ministry. I mean, think about how, let's say, even in the example of live streaming, how many people are going to be impacted by that. And we don't, we don't necessarily acknowledge that enough and talk about the importance of that enough. And I think the church needs to continue to lean into that. So thank you, Aaron. I appreciate how you're being a minister in a very different way.
Amen. For sure. If people want to connect with you, Aaron, how can they do so? Email or whatnot?
Sure. Yeah. Aaron at kingofkings.org. Just AARON. Just like Moses' brother.
kingofkings.org. It's a good day. Go make it a great day. Please subscribe, wherever it is you're taking this in, YouTube, follow us there, Spotify, etc., and get the word out. We're trying to set up kind, challenging, courageous conversations for the present and the future of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod that we would lead very, very well, all for the sake of those who know Jesus and invite them into the mission to go and reach those who don't. It's a good day. Make it a great day by the power of the Spirit. Good work, Jack. We made it. Good work, Aaron.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Lead Time, a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective. The ULC's mission is to collaborate with the local church to discover, develop, and deploy leaders through biblical Lutheran doctrine and innovative methods. To partner with us in this gospel message, subscribe to our channel, then go to the uniteleadership.org to create your free login for exclusive material and resources, and then to explore ways in which you can sponsor an episode. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for next week's episode.